Hello everyone, this is David from Automotive Press. I have a really fascinating stories of two trucks behind me. One is the all-new 2022 Nissan Frontier competing against the best-selling truck, which is the Toyota Tacoma. This is the one I actually own and drive every day. It's a 2021 Tacoma TRD Pro. And how would they compare the all-new truck compared to proven but somewhat outdated Tacoma? It's a fascinating story that I want to share with you. So let me walk you step by step as an automotive engineer what the differences are and which one I prefer to use as a daily truck. So let me take you through the story of two trucks competing for the most important market in North America, which is a mid-size truck market. So first of all, let me talk about the exterior design. Now, of course, that depends a lot on your personal taste, but for me, I actually think the Frontier looks a little bit better than the Tacoma. Now, the Tacoma is a very popular, best-selling mid-size truck, so we all love this proven design, but it's beginning to look a little bit outdated because we have seen this same design since 2016, of course, compared to the Frontier, which has a little bit more of a chiseled, tough look that has a combination of modern design mixed in with traditional truck look. I'm glad that Nissan engineers and designers did not make the front end look too big or too bulky like it did with the Nissan Titan. Instead, it has a tidy, modern look that still makes it look like a truck, but it has a modern touches and a very sleek shape from front to all the way to the back. So I actually think this one looks a little bit more modern, a little bit cleaner look for me. Of course, it's hard to also complain about the Tacoma because we all love this design. It's conventional, it's traditional in design, but there's nothing offensive and nothing kind of weird about this Tacoma design. So what do you think? Let me know in the comments below which one you like better. From my personal taste, I think the Frontier wins my heart as a better looking design. Now, the new Tacoma is coming out in 2 years' time, so it'll be updated, I'm sure, and by that time, it could look way better than this Frontier. But for now, in terms of the exterior design, the Frontier looks better to me. Now, once you move away from the front design, the Toyota and the Nissan truck look very similar on the side all the way through to the back. But the more important things I need to point out is a difference in manufacturing quality or body integrity between the two. The Tacoma has been built in the Texas factory until recently because it's now moved to Mexico for its production. But it is still a very well-made, very reliable truck, as you know, with one of the highest resale value. If I look at the body panels and how they fit together and how they align together, well, it's a perfection. Everything lines up. All the body panels look like it's well integrated. The paint matches between the bumper and the body. And if I kneel down and try to look for the difference in the paint and also the body alignment between all of the panels, well, it's near perfect because it's a Toyota after all. And while some people do complain it's not quite the same as something like a 4Runner, which is built in Japan, I think the difference is pretty minor between trucks that are built in North America and trucks that are built in Japan. So obviously this has been a reliable and proven truck, and the quality both in terms of exterior and interior is first class. Well, what about the Nissan Frontier? Well, it's now built in Canton, Mississippi, which is proven factory, so it should be well made. Now, when I compare side by side, however, there is some differences. Nissan designers and engineers were smart enough to, first of all, change the design of the front fender so that the hood actually goes over the fender, and that way it's hard to tell in terms of the gap between the hood and the fender because one is overlapping the other. And this type of design is popular now. It allows the engineers and manufacturing people to have a little bit more leniency when they're putting the panels together. So it's a smart design. But as you begin to compare the gaps in terms of the front fender to the hood, and then the front fender to the front door, and keep moving backward, well, the Tacoma definitely has a little bit more of a narrow gap. It also has a more consistent gap compared to the Nissan. The difference isn't all that big, nothing to be concerned about, and also the paint job is actually really good on the Frontier. When I look at it like this by kneeling down, it looks consistent and the paint job looks very shiny and glossy with no pigmentation problem. So the quality of the paint job, I think, is about the same on both of these trucks. I would say the body integrity and the body quality is definitely a little bit better on the Tacoma than the Frontier, but the difference is pretty minor. And as you move backwards here, the difference gets even smaller because now there are not any gaps to measure, except for tailgate in the back. And in this case, the Frontier actually has a better fit between the tailgate and the rear quarter panel compared to the Tacoma. So all in all, I would say the manufacturing quality is about the same between the two, with slight edge going to the Tacoma for overall quality, fit, and finish. Nevertheless, the reliability, of course, is something we won't know for a few more years down the road. The Tacoma has been proven, it's top of the game when it comes to reliability and durability. But the Nissan hasn't been bad at all, so we really hope that this will keep true to its heritage of a tough and reliable truck, so that indeed it can go head-to-head with the Tacoma in terms of long-term durability. Now I want to take you into the interior of the two trucks and do some comparison, but more importantly, I want to take these two trucks out for a drive and take you with me so I can tell you what the differences are in terms of the driving feel. To me, the driving character and driving feel is the most important thing to look out for when you're buying a truck, because as you're driving this truck every single day to and from work or wherever you are using it for, the driving character and the driving feel is going to be the determination whether you're going to be happy with the truck. Now you might be anxious to hear a little bit more about the driving feel, so let me give you a quick preview. Even though I love my Tacoma TRD Pro, I will admit the Frontier does drive better, both in terms of steering feel, the steering accuracy, and also the ride and suspension. The engine difference between the two, maybe not as much. Although there are definitely more power and torque on the Frontier, the acceleration is somewhat similar. But the overall feel of the two trucks, when you're driving it to and from work, to a grocery store, or whatever you're doing, is definitely better on the Frontier. It feels more planted, it's more secure, it's more stable over bumpy road, it's quieter on the highway, and the feel of the steering is fantastic on the Frontier. Whereas the Tacoma feels a little bit loose and numb and not as secure feeling as the Frontier. But let me take you into each of the truck and talk about these things a little bit more in detail. Okay, so now I'm inside the 2022 Nissan Frontier, which has a very modern look. It has a conventional design in many ways, but in terms of the infotainment system, the instrument cluster, and the technology in the interior, it is more modern and up-to-date than the Tacoma. The Tacoma is definitely getting outdated there because the interior design looks, well, it's proven, but looks kind of old now. I really do like what Nissan has done with the interior design in the sense that it has a conventional look and feel, but everything is modern. And thankfully, they kept the buttons for everything, for radio, for a variety of different stereo functions, temperature controls, and all that. They kept all of the traditional buttons, which are easier to navigate, and even the glove compartment is actually nice and big. So they've done a wonderful job of making the interior look great, but also very functional. I do have a few complaints. First of all, when I do my engineer's audit check and try to look for squeaks and rattles, by kind of punching away at a variety of different places in the car, it does have a little bit more of a looser feel than the Tacoma, in the sense that in the Tacoma, when you do this kind of audit, there's absolutely nothing that squeaks or rattles. Now, when I'm driving this Frontier, I did not hear any squeaks or rattles, but when I do my punch test here, it does feel like there's some loose panels in there. So over a longer term, let's say some years down the road, some of these can become loose and become squeak or rattle. Aside from that, I've got a few other minor complaints here. One is a bit of a strange one, which is that steering wheel tilts up and down but does not telescope, which is really rare these days in modern cars. Why would they update this entire interior but not give us a telescopic steering? I don't know what engineers were thinking, but that's one complaint. My second complaint is the seat. The seats are more comfortable actually than the Tacoma, and it has a really good adjustment in terms of height, but it doesn't have a lumbar support for some reason. Thankfully, the seat is not all that flat, and it does have a reasonable amount of lumbar support to begin with, but you cannot adjust the lumbar support so that you can have a little bit more of a comfortable sitting environment. That's my complaint number two. Number 3 is that the start and stop button for the engine is hidden way behind the steering wheel. I don't know why, again, they will redesign the entire truck, but put the start button so far behind the steering, you literally have to move your head sideways to go and see the start button for the engine. Otherwise, the interior is actually better than Tacoma, as I mentioned, because it's more modern. The ergonomics are fine on this Nissan Frontier, and the center console is also bigger, and where you place the phone for the charging, the wireless pad, it's also easier on the Frontier. I'm disappointed that we still don't get wireless CarPlay. We do get wired CarPlay for Apple and also Android Auto. Same as the Tacoma, we still don't get wireless CarPlay. So to conclude, the Nissan Frontier does definitely have a better interior, both in terms of functionality and practicality, although it has some downside. Now let's take a look at the Tacoma and see what the differences are. So now I'm inside the 2021 Tacoma TRD Pro, which is my own truck, and I drive this every day, so I know this truck inside and out. It is a very well-built truck, and there's never a single squeak or rattle in this truck. It's absolutely solid and well built, and you can tell when I do my punch test across the interior, nothing is loose and everything is solid. So it's well built, and it's actually a very practical interior, but it does look very outdated in comparison to the Frontier. Whether it's the infotainment system, which is really outdated, or the instrument cluster, which is also difficult to use because it requires you to push all these buttons on the steering to make some adjustment. It's just simply outdated in comparison to the Frontier. Now, thankfully, it's still quite practical because the buttons are large, and I like all of the different cup holders and so forth that we have in the truck. But you know what? It is looking really outdated inside. My other complaints I have with the Tacoma is the basic seating feel and ergonomics. It has been improved over the years, and thankfully Toyota put a power seat option. But a lot of people complain about the seating feel on the driver's side. It doesn't go high enough, and somehow the adjustment is such that you can never quite get comfortable. It's been okay for me, and at least the steering wheel has both tilt and telescopic, unlike in the Nissan, but somehow the driving feel is a little bit better in the Frontier. I do admit that. And of course, there are other minor things that people complain about in the Tacoma, which I must agree, which includes lack of space in the second seat in the back here, as well as the fact that the stereo system, despite having the JBL system, isn't so good. You compare this one to Nissan's Fender system, it's a bit shameful because this one sounds like a normal stereo, and that one truly sounds like a premium stereo to me. Also in the Nissan Frontier, the rear tailgate locks and unlocks with the remote, which is standard with the Pro-4X. On the Tacoma, I have to get it installed separately by the dealer because it doesn't come standard, even in the most expensive Tacoma TRD Pro. I'm sure that in 2 years' time, when the all-new Tacoma shows up, the interior will be much improved, and it's going to be perhaps even better than the Nissan Frontier. But until then, the Frontier wins the game when it comes to interior design and features. Now the most important comparison begins, which is the driving feel of the two trucks. How do they actually feel like on the road, and which one do I prefer? Well, let me take it on the road and explain everything to you. So all week I have been driving the Nissan Frontier to compare against the Tacoma TRD Pro. I've driven this truck in city road, on highway, over bumpy road, over smooth road, and tried to mimic what it would feel like to own this Nissan Frontier and to drive it every day. Because I own the Tacoma TRD Pro, obviously I know that truck inside and out, and I have been driving it for almost a year. So I really understand the driving dynamic of the Tacoma, but I was really curious to find out what it would be in comparison to the Frontier. Well, this is where the biggest difference is between the two trucks. In terms of the exterior and interior, the differences are maybe very small, but the driving character is quite different. The Tacoma TRD Pro is definitely showing its age because the Frontier is really a joy to drive. The engine, of course, has more power and torque, not a whole lot more, but enough to show a difference when you step on the gas and try to go up a hill, for example, or to pass another vehicle on the highway. The difference in acceleration isn't perhaps huge, but the feel is very different because the Frontier is much smoother and refined when you are stepping on the gas. The same thing goes for the suspension. The Frontier has a really refined, extremely smooth ride for a truck despite having some conventional suspension designs such as leaf springs in the back. When I drive it over a bumpy road, even though Tacoma TRD Pro has a really fantastic fork suspension, it kind of loses a balance right after a bumpy road, such as speed bumps. But the Frontier stays planted and stays flat. So the engineers have done a great job of designing a suspension that stays stable on the highway but can take bumps without any issues. Also, the steering feel is quite different between the two. The Nissan Frontier has surprisingly heavy steering. I suppose it's kind of following the Nissan Titan's character because that Titan also has the heaviest steering feel among all full-size trucks. So they must have kept that character for the Frontier because it is definitely the heaviest feel among all mid-size trucks. Now that is either good or bad depending on your character. I really like the heavier steering because it provides more confidence, it gives you more of a truck feel, and generally speaking it's more fun to drive when the steering has some weight and some heft. So I personally really like that feel. Now some people might prefer lighter steering and they don't want the steering to feel so heavy. In that case they're going to prefer Tacoma, which still has a really good steering feel, but it is definitely lighter than the Nissan Frontier. I think, to be honest, the Nissan Frontier steering is a little bit too heavy for most people, but personally I really like it. More importantly, it's more precise and accurate than the Tacoma. The Tacoma steering tends to have a bit of a floaty feel and it can feel a bit numb. Finally, the Nissan Frontier is quieter, especially on the highway. It has better insulation, it stays more stable and more silky smooth, whereas the Tacoma is quite loud on the highway, and because it has a TRD Pro exhaust, obviously it's also very loud at the lower speed. So overall, if you were to ask me which truck do I prefer to drive as an everyday vehicle, well, I will have to say it's a Frontier because it has a smoother feel, a bit more refined feel without losing that important truck feel. It's quieter and more stable on the highway. And then for me anyway, the heavier steering and the more precise steering gives me a better fun to drive factor. We are expecting Toyota to completely overhaul the Tacoma to bring the brand new version in about 2 years' time. So that new version, I'm sure, will be substantially better than this one, and it could be much better than the Frontier. But of course, it's 2 years away, so we won't know exactly what's going to happen until then. We are speculating that the new Tacoma will have a 2.4-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine versus the V6 engine that we have now. So if you like the V6 engine that you see in the Tacoma, I would urge you to buy it now before they change it to turbo, because it's going to feel very different at that point. Anyway, the new Tacoma is 2 years away, so there's no point in talking about that right now, because at this point in time, in terms of the 2021-2022 calendar year, the Nissan Frontier is definitely a better truck overall.